Tommy had been sleeping under the bridge for almost 4 years now. Every morning he'd wake up when the sun hit his face through the concrete gaps above him. He'd fold his blanket carefully, pack it into his old green backpack, and walk the 15 minutes to his usual spot on Market Street. His corner wasn't special to anyone else, but to Tommy, it was perfect. Right in front of a coffee shop where people actually looked at him sometimes. Not all of them, but enough. He had a piece of cardboard that he'd kept dry for months. Written on it in black marker were the words, "Veteran, hungry, anything helps." God bless you. Most days were the same. People walked by in a hurry, staring at their phones or talking to someone through earbuds. Some dropped coins in his cup without looking. A few stopped to chat. Tommy liked those people best. The ones who asked his name, who treated him like he was still a person and not just part of the sidewalk. He wasn't always like this. Tommy used to have a life that made sense. A job at a warehouse, a small apartment with a TV that worked, even a girlfriend for a while. But then his back injury happened and the pain pills came next, and after that everything just fell apart like dominoes. One day he was paying rent and the next day he was explaining to his landlord why he couldn't. Then came the eviction notice, the lost job, the phone that got shut off because he couldn't pay the bill. That was 4 years ago. Now this corner was his office and his backpack held everything he owned in the world. On this particular Tuesday morning, Tommy noticed something different. There was more foot traffic than usual. People dressed up nice, carrying flowers, walking in small groups and laughing. He asked a woman who stopped to drop $1 in his cup. "Oh, there's a big wedding happening at the hotel down the street," she said, smiling. "Supposed to be beautiful. The bride's father owns half the buildings downtown." Tommy nodded and thanked her. He watched the well-dressed people pass by all morning, wondering what it must feel like to have that kind of money. To not worry about where your next meal comes from or where you'll sleep when it rains. 3 blocks away, inside a fancy bridal suite at the Grand Hotel, Rebecca was having the best morning of her entire life. Her wedding dress hung on the door, white and perfect with tiny pearls sewn into the fabric. Her bridesmaids were laughing and drinking champagne even though it was only 10 in the morning. Someone was doing her hair while another person worked on her makeup. But the best part, the thing that made Rebecca's heart feel like it might burst, was the ring on her finger. Not her new wedding ring, not yet. This was her grandmother's engagement ring, the one that had been passed down through 3 generations of women in her family. Her grandmother, Rose, had worn this ring for 52 years. She'd worn it through good times and bad times, through raising 4 kids and bearing the love of her life. When Rose died last year, she'd left the ring to Rebecca with a note that said, "Wear this and remember that real love lasts forever." The ring was stunning, a platinum band with a diamond so clear and bright it seemed to glow from the inside. 2 full carats, the jeweler had said when Rebecca took it to be cleaned and resized, worth at least $30,000, maybe more. But to Rebecca it was priceless. "I need to run down to the lobby," Rebecca told her bridesmaids around noon. "The photographer wants to take some shots of me looking out the window with the city behind me. Want us to come?" Her maid of honor asked. No, you guys stay here. I'll be back in 15 minutes. Rebecca grabbed her phone and her coat and headed out. The hotel hallway was quiet, just the sound of her heels on the carpet. She pressed the elevator button and waited, looking at the ring on her finger, turning her hand back and forth to watch it sparkle. In the elevator, she pulled out her phone to text her fiancé. 3 hours until I'm your wife, she typed, smiling. Her phone buzzed back immediately. Can't wait. Love you more than anything. When she stepped out into the lobby, it was chaos. People everywhere. Hotel staff rushing around, someone yelling about flowers. Rebecca laughed and pushed through the crowd, heading for the big windows on the east side where the photographer wanted the shots. She shoved her hands in her coat pockets as she walked. It was chilly near the windows. The photographer was already there, setting up his equipment. Perfect timing, he said. Let's get you right here by this window. The light is amazing. Rebecca posed for maybe 10 minutes, turning this way and that, smiling until her face hurt. When they finished, she thanked him and headed back upstairs. She pulled her phone out to check the time. That's when her stomach dropped. That's when everything stopped. That's when her whole world tilted sideways. She looked at her left hand. The ring was gone. Rebecca stared at her bare finger like it might somehow make the ring reappear. She checked her other hand. Nothing. She looked on the floor around her feet. Nothing. No, she whispered. No. She ran her hands through her hair, checked all her pockets, patted down her coat. The ring wasn't anywhere. Her grandmother's ring, the ring that had survived wars and decades and everything life could throw at it, gone. Rebecca felt her chest get tight. She couldn't breathe right. The lobby seemed to spin around her. This couldn't be happening. Not today. Not this ring. Not the one thing in the world she'd promised her mother she'd keep safe. She started retracing her steps, walking fast, her eyes scanning every inch of floor. Other people stared at her, but she didn't care. She went back to the elevator, checked inside, ran her fingers along the carpet. Nothing. Back in the bridal suite, she tried to keep it together, but her hands were shaking. "Has anyone seen my grandmother's ring?" she asked, her voice breaking. Her bridesmaids all froze. "What do you mean? You were wearing it, I know. I know I was. But it's gone. I can't find it anywhere." What followed was chaos. Everyone searching, calling the hotel manager, talking to security. Rebecca was crying now, mascara running down her face. Her mother showed up and started crying too. "How could you lose it?" her mother kept saying. "That was your grandmother's ring. How could you?" Rebecca didn't have an answer. She just kept saying she was sorry, over and over, but sorry didn't bring the ring back. Sorry didn't fix this. By mid-afternoon, Rebecca had filed a report with hotel security. By evening, she'd called the police. Her father offered a $2,000 reward to anyone who found it. They posted on every social media site they could think of. They printed flyers and put them up all over downtown. But as the sun set on what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life, Rebecca sat in her hotel room, still in her bathrobe, the wedding dress hanging untouched on the door. The ring was gone. And with it, a piece of her family's history had vanished into the city like it had never existed at all. Tommy didn't know anything about the lost ring. He was just trying to make it through another day. By late afternoon, his cup had maybe $6 in it, enough for a burger if he went to the cheap place 2 blocks over, maybe a coffee too if he was lucky. The wedding crowd had died down. Most people had gone inside the hotel hours ago. Now it was just regular foot traffic, office workers heading home, tired and distracted. A few tourists taking pictures of the old buildings. Tommy was getting ready to pack up for the day when he saw something strange. There was a piece of paper taped to the lamppost across the street. Then another one on the wall of the coffee shop. Someone was putting up flyers everywhere. He stood up slowly, his knees cracking, and walked over to look at one. His reading wasn't great anymore. His eyes weren't what they used to be, but he could make out the important parts. "Lost," it said in big letters at the top. Below that was a picture of a ring. A fancy ring with a big diamond. Family heirloom engagement ring. Lost downtown. Massive sentimental value. Reward offered. "Please call." Tommy studied the picture. It was a beautiful ring. The kind of thing he'd never be able to afford in a million lifetimes. Someone was probably crying their eyes out over losing it. He hoped they found it. He went back to his corner and started packing his stuff. That's when he noticed something weird in the sidewalk crack near the storm drain. Something that caught the light. Something shiny. At first, he thought it was a piece of glass or maybe a quarter that had gotten stuck. But when he bent down to look closer, his heart started beating faster. Wedged in the crack, barely visible unless you were looking right at it, was a ring. Tommy's hand shook as he worked it free. It took him a minute, using his fingernail to pry it loose. When he finally got it out and held it up to the fading sunlight, his mouth went dry. It was the ring from the flyer. Had to be. The exact same platinum band, the huge diamond catching the light and throwing little rainbows onto his dirty fingers. He looked around to see if anyone was watching. The street was busy, but nobody was paying attention to him. They never did. He closed his fist around the ring and walked quickly back to his corner, his mind racing so fast he could barely think straight. Tommy sat down and opened his hand. The ring sat there in his palm, worth more than he'd made in the last 4 years combined, maybe more than he'd made in his entire life. This tiny piece of metal and stone could change everything. He started thinking about what $2,000 could do. That was the reward on the flyer. $2,000. He could get a room somewhere, a real room with a door that locked and a bed that didn't smell like the street. He could buy new clothes, the kind that didn't have holes in them. He could eat real food, not just dollar menu burgers and whatever the shelter was serving. Maybe he could even save some of it. Get enough together to put down a deposit on an apartment eventually. Get a phone that actually worked. Start applying for jobs again. But then Tommy thought about something else. He thought about the person who lost this ring. The flyer said it was a family heirloom. That meant it had history. That meant someone's grandmother or great-grandmother had worn it. That meant it was more than just money to whoever lost it. He remembered his own mother. She'd worn a simple gold band his whole life, nothing fancy. But she'd loved that ring more than anything. When she got sick and her fingers got thin, she'd been so scared of losing it. She'd made Tommy promise to keep it safe if anything happened to her. He'd sold that ring 3 years ago to buy pills. He still felt sick about it sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep. His mother's ring. The one thing she'd asked him to protect, and he'd sold it to a pawn shop for $80. Tommy looked at the ring in his hand again. Someone out there was feeling the way he'd felt when he sold his mother's ring. Probably worse, because at least he'd chosen to get rid of it. This person had lost theirs by accident. But still, $2,000. That was real money. That was a chance to get off the street. When was he ever going to get another opportunity like this? He sat there for an hour just thinking, watching the ring catch the last bits of sunlight, turning it over in his fingers, testing how heavy it was, wondering what it would feel like to walk into a pawn shop with something this valuable. The sun was setting now, painting the sky orange and pink. Most of the businesses were closing up. The coffee shop pulled in their sign and locked the door. The office workers were all gone. Soon it would just be him and the other street people and the occasional cop car rolling by to make sure nobody was causing trouble. Tommy pulled out his phone. It wasn't really his phone. It was one the shelter had given him. It barely worked and the screen was cracked, but you could make calls if you stood in the right spot and held it at the right angle. He looked at the number on the flyer. Then he looked at the ring again. Then back at the number. This was crazy. He needed this money. He deserved this money, didn't he? After everything he'd been through? After 4 years of sleeping on concrete and eating garbage and being invisible to everyone who passed him on the street? But every time he tried to convince himself to keep the ring, to sell it and take the money and start over, he saw his mother's face. He saw that gold band on her thin finger. He remembered how she'd trusted him to do the right thing, and how he'd let her down. Tommy had made a lot of bad choices in his life. He knew that. Everyone knew that. That's why he was here on this corner, with everything he owned in a backpack. But maybe, just once, he could make a different choice. Maybe, just once, he could be the person his mother thought he was, back before everything went wrong. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely dial the number. He had to try 3 times before he got it right. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Maybe nobody would answer. Maybe that would make the decision for him. Then someone picked up. A woman's voice, thick and tired, like she'd been crying for hours. Hello? Tommy's throat was so dry he could barely speak. Hi. My name is Tommy. I think I found your ring. There was silence on the other end. Then a sound like the woman was choking or gasping. What, you found it? Are you sure? Where? It was stuck in a crack in the sidewalk. Down by Market Street. Near the coffee shop. It's the one from your flyer. The platinum one with the big diamond. Oh my God, yes, that's it. That's my grandmother's ring. I can't believe you found it. Where are you? I can come right now. Right this second, Tommy told her where he was. She said she'd be there in 10 minutes. He hung up and sat back down on the sidewalk, the ring still in his hand. What was he doing? He'd just given up $2,000. $2,000 that could have changed his life, all to give some rich person back their jewelry. They probably had 10 more rings just like it at home. They probably wouldn't even miss it. But even as he thought those things, Tommy knew they weren't true. He'd heard the woman's voice on the phone, the way she'd gasped when he said he found it, the way she'd started crying. That wasn't someone who could just buy another ring. That was someone who'd lost something that mattered. 8 minutes later, a car pulled up and a young woman jumped out. She was wearing a bathrobe and slippers, like she'd just thrown on whatever she could find and run out the door. Her eyes were red from crying and her hair was a mess. She looked around frantically until she saw Tommy sitting on his corner. Then she ran over, not caring that he was homeless, not caring about anything except the ring. Are you Tommy? She asked, breathing hard. He nodded and stood up. He pulled the ring from his pocket and held it out to her. She took it with both hands like it might disappear if she didn't hold it tight enough. Then she started crying again, really crying, holding the ring against her chest. Thank you, she kept saying. Thank you so much. You don't understand what this means. This was my grandmother's ring. It's the only thing I have left of her. I thought it was gone forever. She reached into her bathrobe pocket and pulled out an envelope. Here, the reward. It's $2,000 like we promised. Tommy looked at the envelope. All that money. Right there in her hand. All he had to do was take it. But something stopped him. Something he couldn't quite explain. I don't want it, he heard himself say. Rebecca stared at him like he'd just spoken a foreign language. What? Of course you want it. You earned it. You found my ring. Please take it. Tommy shook his head. I didn't find it for money. I found it because it was the right thing to do. That ring means something to you. Some things are more important than money. He said it, and part of him couldn't believe those words came out of his mouth. But another part of him, the part that remembered who he used to be before the pills and the street, felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt like maybe he was still worth something after all. Rebecca stood there on the sidewalk, still holding the envelope full of money, completely confused. Nobody turned down $2,000, especially not someone who clearly needed it as badly as this man did. She looked at Tommy, really looked at him for the first time. His clothes were worn and dirty. His face had lines that made him look older than he probably was. His hands were rough and weathered. This was someone who'd been living on the street for a long time, and he was refusing money that could change his life. I don't understand, she said quietly. Why won't you take it? Tommy shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He wasn't used to having conversations this long with people who actually cared what he said. Because if I take that money, then I found your ring for the wrong reason. I found it because it was yours. Because you lost something important. Not because I wanted to get paid. Rebecca felt tears starting again. Here she was, standing in her bathrobe in the middle of downtown, about to get married in a few hours, and a homeless man was teaching her something about character. About doing the right thing when nobody's watching. About being honest when you could easily be anything else. Please, she said, at least let me buy you dinner. Let me do something. Tommy smiled a little. I could eat. They walked to a diner 2 blocks away. People stared as they came in. This woman in a bathrobe and this man who obviously lived on the street. Rebecca didn't care. She led Tommy to a booth in the back and they sat down. Order whatever you want, she said. Seriously, anything. Tommy ordered a burger and fries and a chocolate milkshake. When the food came, he ate slowly like he was trying to make it last. Rebecca just sat there watching him, still holding her grandmother's ring in her hand. Can I ask you something? She said after a while. Tommy nodded, his mouth full of burger. How long have you been on the street? He swallowed and took a sip of his milkshake. Almost 4 years now. What happened? I mean, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. But I'm curious. How does someone end up living outside? Tommy put down his burger. Nobody ever asked him that. Most people didn't want to know. They wanted to believe that homeless people were homeless because they were lazy or crazy, or deserved it somehow. It was easier than thinking about how it could happen to anyone. I got hurt at work, he said. Threw my back out loading trucks. Doctor gave me pain pills. Those pills worked real good, too good. Before I knew it, I needed them just to feel normal. Then I needed more than the doctor would give me. Then I was buying them from people I shouldn't have been buying from. Then I couldn't afford rent anymore. Then I got evicted. Then everything just fell apart. Rebecca listened without interrupting, without judging, just listening. I had a family, Tommy continued. A sister, a nephew. But I lied to them too many times. Borrowed money I never paid back. They tried to help, but I wasn't ready to be helped. After a while, they stopped calling. Can't blame them. I wasn't a good person to have in your life back then. Are you clean now? Rebecca asked gently. Tommy nodded. Been clean for 8 months. Finally got into a program through the VA. It took me 3 tries, but it stuck this time. Problem is, being clean doesn't give you your life back. I'm still on the street. Still don't have a job. Still don't have a place to live. Being clean just means I'm aware of how bad things are, you know. When I was using, at least I was too messed up to care. Rebecca felt something breaking open in her chest. This man had returned a $30,000 ring when he could have sold it. This man who'd been clean for 8 months and was trying to rebuild a life from nothing. This man who still knew the difference between right and wrong when plenty of people with homes and jobs had forgotten. I'm getting married today, she said. Or at least I'm supposed to. I almost called it off when I lost the ring. My whole family was saying it was a bad sign. That starting a marriage by losing my grandmother's ring meant everything was cursed. But you don't believe that? Tommy asked. I didn't know what to believe, but now I think losing the ring wasn't a curse. It was supposed to happen, because I was supposed to meet you. Tommy laughed, but not in a mean way. I don't think a rich girl like you was supposed to meet a homeless guy like me. Why not? Rebecca said. Maybe that's exactly what was supposed to happen. Maybe I needed to remember that there are more important things than expensive weddings and fancy rings. Maybe I needed to meet someone who knows what real integrity looks like. She pulled out her phone and started typing. Tommy ate his fries and tried not to stare at her. She seemed like she was from a completely different world, the kind of world he used to think he'd live in someday. Back when he was young and everything still seemed possible. What's your full name? Rebecca asked, looking up from her phone. Thomas Ray Miller, but everyone calls me Tommy. Tommy, I'm texting my fiancé. His name is David, he's a lawyer. I'm telling him about you. Why? Because you need help. Real help. And we're going to give it to you. Tommy felt something twist in his stomach. He didn't like charity. Didn't like feeling like a project. I don't need your pity. This isn't pity, Rebecca said firmly. This is gratitude. You gave me back something priceless. Now I want to help you get your life back. That's not pity. That's just decent people helping each other. Her phone buzzed. She read the message and smiled. David says he wants to meet you. He works with a lot of veteran programs. He thinks he can connect you with some resources. I don't know, Tommy said. I've tried programs before. They don't really work for people like me. Maybe they will this time. Maybe this time is different. You said it yourself, you're 8 months clean. That's not nothing. That's everything. Tommy finished his milkshake and looked out the window. The sun was gone now and the streetlights were coming on. Soon he'd need to head back to his spot under the bridge, roll out his blanket, try to get some sleep before the cops came by to check on him. But something felt different tonight. For the first time in years, something felt like it might actually change. There's something else, Rebecca said. I want you to come to my wedding. Tommy laughed out loud this time. Yeah, right. A homeless guy at your fancy wedding. That'll go over great. I'm serious. You're coming. David's already on board. We'll get you some nice clothes, get you cleaned up, and you're going to be there. You're part of this story now. You're part of the best thing that happened on my wedding day. What about your family? What are they going to say? Rebecca grinned. They're going to say thank you. Because without you, I wouldn't be getting married with my grandmother's ring, and more than that, they're going to meet someone who reminded me what really matters. Tommy didn't know what to say. He'd spent 4 years being invisible, being ignored, being treated like he didn't matter. And now this woman wanted him at her wedding, wanted to help him, wanted to introduce him to her family. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice rough. You don't even know me. Because you did something good when you didn't have to. Because you chose to be honest when you could have chosen to be selfish. Because you reminded me that good people exist everywhere, even in places we don't expect to find them. She reached across the table and put her hand on top of his. Her hand was soft and clean. His was rough and dirty, but she didn't pull away. Let us help you, Tommy, please. You gave me something precious back. Now let me give you something precious too. Let me give you a chance. Tommy felt his eyes getting wet. He couldn't remember the last time he'd cried. Maybe not since his mother died. But sitting here in this diner booth with a woman he'd just met an hour ago offering him hope, he felt something break loose inside him. Okay, he whispered. Okay? Rebecca squeezed his hand and smiled. Good, now finish those fries. We have a wedding to get to. Tommy laughed and wiped his eyes with his sleeve. Maybe she was right. Maybe losing that ring wasn't a curse. Maybe it was the luckiest thing that ever happened to both of them. Outside the window, the city lights twinkled. The same city that had been so cold to him for 4 years suddenly felt a little bit warmer. A little bit more like a place where good things could happen. A little bit more like home. Rebecca picked up her phone and made a few more calls. First to the hotel to tell them to hold the wedding. She'd be there soon. Then to David to tell him to get ready to meet Tommy. Then to her mother to explain what had happened. Mom, I found the ring. No, listen. Just listen. I met someone amazing. Someone who's going to come to the wedding. No, I'll explain later. Just trust me. This is important. When she hung up, Tommy was looking at her with something like wonder. You're really serious about this? Completely serious. My wedding is in 3 hours. We need to get you ready. They left the diner and Rebecca flagged down a cab. She gave the driver the address of a store downtown that she knew would still be open, a men's clothing store where David bought his suits. In the cab, Tommy stared out the window at the streets he'd walked 1,000 times. But tonight everything looked different. Tonight he wasn't just surviving. Tonight he was someone's honored guest. Tonight he mattered. When they got to the store, the manager took one look at Tommy and one look at Rebecca in her bathrobe and clearly didn't know what to make of them. But Rebecca explained the situation, pulled out her credit card, and within 45 minutes, Tommy was standing in front of a mirror in a dark blue suit, a white shirt, and a tie that actually matched. He barely recognized himself. The man in the mirror looked like someone respectable, someone who belonged at a wedding, someone who mattered. "You clean up nice," Rebecca said, grinning. Tommy touched the lapel of the suit jacket. "I haven't worn anything like this in years." "Well, you're wearing it now. Come on, we have a wedding to get to." The wedding was beautiful. Even Tommy, who hadn't been to any kind of fancy event in years, could tell this was something special. The hotel ballroom was decorated with thousands of white flowers. String lights hung from the ceiling like stars. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes, laughing and taking pictures. Tommy stood near the back, feeling out of place despite the nice suit. He kept tugging at his tie, worried he'd do something wrong or embarrass Rebecca. But she kept checking on him, making sure he had a seat, making sure he had food, making sure he knew he was welcome. When the ceremony started and Rebecca walked down the aisle in her white dress, Tommy felt his throat get tight. She looked happy, really truly happy. And on her finger, catching the light from all those string lights, was her grandmother's ring. After the ceremony, during the reception, Rebecca stood up to make a speech. Tommy figured she'd talk about her new husband, about how much she loved him, about their future together. And she did say those things, but then she said something else. "Today didn't go the way I planned," she said, and everyone laughed. "I lost something very precious to me, my grandmother's ring. And I thought that was the worst thing that could happen on my wedding day." She paused and looked around the room until she found Tommy sitting at a table near the back. "But then I met someone who reminded me what this day is really about. Not about expensive rings or perfect plans. It's about choosing to do the right thing, even when it's hard, even when nobody would know if you didn't." She gestured for Tommy to stand up. He shook his head, but everyone was already looking at him and clapping. Slowly he stood. "This is Tommy," Rebecca said. "He found my ring when he could have easily kept it or sold it. He called me when he could have just walked away. He reminded me that integrity isn't about what you have. It's about who you are." The whole room applauded. Tommy's face felt hot and he sat back down as fast as he could. But people came over to shake his hand and thank him. Rebecca's mother hugged him, crying. Her father pumped his hand and said, "You're a good man. A really good man." Later, when things had calmed down a bit, David, Rebecca's new husband, pulled Tommy aside. They went out to a quiet hallway where they could talk. "Rebecca told me your story," David said. He was tall and confident, the kind of guy who looked like he'd never had a hard day in his life. But his eyes were kind. She said, "You're a veteran." Tommy nodded. "Army. 2 tours. Thank you for your service, seriously. My father was a Marine, so I grew up with a lot of respect for what you guys do." David pulled out his phone and started scrolling. "I work with a couple of organizations that help veterans get back on their feet. Housing, job placement, counseling, all of that. I'd like to connect you with them." "I appreciate that," Tommy said carefully. "But I've tried programs before. They don't always work out." "I know. The system's broken in a lot of ways. But these are good people and they get results. And more than that, I'm going to personally make sure you get through the process. I'll be your advocate." That's a promise. Tommy didn't know what to say. Strangers didn't make promises like that, especially not to homeless people. "Why would you do that?" David smiled. "Because you did something incredible for my wife. Because you deserve a second chance. And honestly, because it's the right thing to do. You showed us that today. Now let us show you the same thing." Over the next few days, David was true to his word. He made phone calls, sent emails, pulled strings. Within a week, Tommy had an interview at a transitional housing program specifically for veterans. Within 2 weeks, he had a bed in a clean, safe place with a door that locked. Within a month, he was connected with a job training program. It wasn't easy. There were days when Tommy wanted to quit. when the old demons came back and whispered that he wasn't worth saving. But every time he felt that way, he'd get a text from Rebecca or a call from David, checking in on him, reminding him that people believed in him, that he'd proven he was worth believing in. 3 months after the wedding, Tommy got his first real paycheck from a new job at a veterans community center. It wasn't much, just helping out with maintenance and talking to guys who were going through what he'd gone through. But it was honest work, and he was good at it. He saved every penny he could. He wanted to get his own apartment someday, not just a room in a transitional house. He wanted to have his own place with his own furniture, where he could invite people over if he wanted to. 6 months after the wedding, Tommy was standing in his new apartment. It was small, just a studio, but it was his. The walls were plain white and the furniture was cheap stuff from a thrift store, but none of that mattered. He had a home again. He had a job again. He had a life again. On the wall he hung a photo that Rebecca had sent him. It was from her wedding. Tommy was in the picture, standing next to Rebecca and David, all three of them smiling. He looked at that photo every morning when he woke up. It reminded him of the moment when everything changed. The moment when he chose to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. Rebecca and David kept in touch. They'd meet for coffee every few weeks. Tommy would tell them about his progress, how many days clean he was, how work was going. They'd tell him about their life, about the house they'd bought, about their plans for the future. "I'm proud of you," Rebecca said during one of their coffee meetings. "Look at how far you've come." Tommy stirred his coffee and smiled. "I almost kept that ring, you know. I sat there for an hour trying to convince myself to sell it." "What made you change your mind?" David asked my mother. "She had a ring she loved, nothing fancy, just a gold band. She made me promise to take care of it when she died. I sold it to buy drugs. I've felt guilty about that every day since. When I found your ring, I thought about how she'd feel if she could see me, and I realized I had a choice. I could be the person who steals from people, or I could be the person who returns what they lost. I could be the guy who let his mother down, or I could be the guy who made her proud." Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "She would be proud. I know she would." Tommy felt his eyes get wet. "I hope so. I really do." A year after the wedding, Tommy met his sister again for the first time in 5 years. David had helped him track her down. They met at a park, awkward at first, neither of them knowing what to say. But slowly they started talking. Tommy apologized for everything he'd put her through. She cried and said she'd missed him. "I didn't think you'd ever get clean," she said. "I'm so glad I was wrong." They started meeting regularly after that. His nephew, who was 9 now and barely remembered Uncle Tommy, started coming to visit. Tommy taught him how to throw a baseball. Normal stuff. Family stuff. The kind of stuff he thought he'd lost forever. Rebecca's wedding gift kept on giving. Not just because David had connected him with resources, though that helped, but because returning that ring had reminded Tommy of something he'd forgotten. It reminded him that he was capable of doing good things, that he was still a decent person underneath all the mistakes and the pain and the years on the street. One day Tommy was walking downtown, heading to work, and he passed his old corner. The one where he used to sit with his cardboard sign. Someone else was there now, a younger guy with a dog and a backpack. Tommy stopped and looked at him for a minute. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. He walked over and handed it to the guy. "What's this for?" the young man asked, suspicious. "No reason. Just wanted to help. Things get better, okay? Even when it doesn't feel like they will. They can get better." The guy looked at the 20 like it was 100. "Thanks, man. Seriously, thank you." Tommy walked away feeling lighter than he had in years. The circle was complete. He'd received help when he needed it. Now he could give help to someone else. That's how it was supposed to work. At Rebecca and David's 1-year anniversary party, Tommy stood up to make a toast. His hands shook a little. He wasn't used to public speaking, but he had something he needed to say. "A year ago, I found a ring on the sidewalk. I almost kept it. I almost sold it. But I didn't. And that choice changed my life in ways I never could have imagined." He looked at Rebecca and David, both of them smiling at him. "You two gave me back my life. But more than that, you gave me back myself. You reminded me that I'm worth saving, that I'm worth believing in. So thank you for everything." Everyone clapped. Rebecca was crying again, happy tears this time. David raised his glass. "To Tommy," he said. "To second chances. To doing the right thing, and to the family we choose. To family, everyone echoed. Tommy clinked his glass against theirs and smiled. He had a home now. He had a job now. He had people who cared about him now. But more important than any of that, he had his self-respect back. He had his integrity back. He had proof that he was still the person his mother had raised him to be. And it all started because he found a ring and chose to give it back. One small choice. One honest moment. That's all it took to change two lives forever. 2 years had passed since that Tuesday afternoon when Tommy found a ring in a sidewalk crack. 2 years since he made a choice that changed everything. Looking back now, it almost felt like it had happened to someone else. Like he was watching a movie about a different person's life. But it was real. All of it was real. Tommy lived in a real apartment now. Paid real rent with money from a real job. He had relationships with real people who actually cared whether he lived or died. He had a future that extended beyond just surviving another day. The Veterans Community Center where he worked had promoted him to full-time coordinator. He spent his days talking to guys who reminded him of himself a few years ago. Guys who'd lost their way and didn't know how to find it again. Guys who'd made mistakes and thought those mistakes defined them forever. It gets better, he'd tell them, sitting in the center's common room with coffee and bagels. I know you don't believe it right now. I didn't believe it either. But it does. One day at a time. One good choice at a time. Some of them listened. Some of them didn't. Tommy understood both reactions. You can't help someone who isn't ready to be helped. He'd learned that the hard way. But the ones who were ready, the ones who wanted to change, Tommy could reach them. Because he'd been exactly where they were. He knew what it felt like to have nothing. To be nothing in the eyes of everyone around you. And he knew what it felt like to climb back out of that hole. His apartment had gotten a little nicer over time. He'd bought a real bed to replace the air mattress he started with. Got a TV from a yard sale, put up some pictures on the walls. It wasn't fancy, but it was home, his home. The first real home he'd had in over 6 years. Every morning he still looked at the wedding photo hanging by his door. Tommy in his blue suit, standing between Rebecca and David, all of them grinning like they'd just won the lottery. In a way they had. They'd all won something more valuable than money. They'd won a reminder that goodness still existed in the world. Rebecca had a baby now. A little girl named Rose after her grandmother. Tommy had visited them in the hospital the day she was born. David had texted him at 6 in the morning. She's here. Come meet her. When Tommy held little Rose for the first time, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb, he'd felt something shift in his chest. This child would grow up hearing the story about how her parents met a homeless man who returned a ring. She'd learn that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. That character is built in moments when nobody's watching. That integrity is choosing honesty even when you could choose profit. I want her to be like you, Rebecca had said, watching Tommy hold her daughter. I want her to have your heart. Tommy had laughed at that. My heart got me addicted to pills and living under a bridge. No, Rebecca said firmly. Your heart got you clean. Your heart made you return something you could have kept. Your heart is the reason you're standing here right now, holding my daughter. Don't discount that. Tommy still met up with Rebecca and David regularly. Their coffee dates had become a tradition. Once a month, without fail, they'd meet at the same diner where Rebecca had bought him his first meal that night. They'd talk about everything and nothing, work and family and dreams and fears. Remember when you refused the reward? David said during one of these meetings, shaking his head. I still can't get over that. $2,000 and you just said no. If I'd taken the money, it wouldn't have meant as much, Tommy explained. I'd have spent it eventually. It would have run out. But what I got instead, that doesn't run out. You gave me something that money can't buy. What's that? Rebecca asked. A reason to believe I'm worth something. A reason to think I could be someone better than I was. You can't put a price on that. These conversations meant more to Tommy than he could express. For so long he'd been invisible. People looked through him, past him, around him. But never at him. Never really seeing him as a person. Rebecca and David saw him. They knew him. They cared about what happened to him. That alone was worth more than any reward money. Tommy had reconnected with more of his family too. His sister came to visit his apartment regularly now. His nephew, who was 11, thought Uncle Tommy was the coolest person alive because he worked with veterans and had been through stuff. The kid didn't really understand what that meant yet. But Tommy was okay with that. There was plenty of time for hard truths later. For now, it was enough that they had a relationship again. His sister had told him something recently that stuck with him. They were sitting in his apartment watching her son play with some toys Tommy had bought him, when she said, "Mom would be so proud of you." Tommy had felt his throat get tight. "I don't know about that. I let her down pretty bad." "Yeah, you did," his sister agreed, "but you found your way back. That's what matters." She always said people aren't defined by their worst moments. They're defined by what they do after those moments. How they rebuild. You've rebuilt, Tommy. You're living proof that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. Those words stayed with him. He thought about them at work when things got hard. He thought about them when he felt the old cravings trying to creep back in. He thought about them late at night when he couldn't sleep, and the demons came to visit. People aren't defined by their worst moments. They're defined by what they do after. The story about the ring had gotten some attention over the years. A local news station had done a piece about it. Then a larger outlet picked it up. The internet did what the internet does, spreading the story to millions of people. Tommy got recognized sometimes. People would stop him on the street or in the store. "Are you the guy who returned the ring?" they'd ask. Tommy never knew how to respond to that. "Yeah, that's me." Some of them wanted to shake his hand. Some wanted to tell him their own stories of hardship and recovery. Some just wanted to say thank you, though Tommy was never quite sure what they were thanking him for. For being honest? That shouldn't be remarkable. That should be normal. But he was starting to understand that in a world where people often choose the easy path over the right path, honesty was remarkable. Integrity was remarkable. Doing the right thing when you had every reason not to was worth celebrating. One day, a young guy came up to Tommy at the community center. He was thin and fidgety, his clothes dirty, his eyes haunted. Tommy recognized that look. He'd seen it in the mirror a few years ago. "Are you Tommy Miller?" the young man asked. "That's me." "What can I do for you?" "I saw your story online about the ring. I'm in kind of a bad place right now. Been on the streets for about 6 months. I was wondering if you could help me, if you could tell me how you got out." Tommy invited him to sit down. They talked for 2 hours. Tommy told him everything. The addiction, the homelessness, the moment he found the ring, the choice he made, everything that came after. The young man listened to every word like his life depended on it. Maybe it did. "The thing is," Tommy said, "nobody can save you except yourself. People can help. They can give you resources and opportunities. But you have to decide you're worth saving. You have to decide you want to be better. That's the first step. That's the only step that matters." The young man was crying now. "I want to be better. I'm so tired of living like this." "Then let's get you some help," Tommy said. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. By the end of the day, the young man had a bed in a shelter and an appointment at a rehab facility. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That's all anyone ever needs. A start, a chance, a reason to believe things can change. Watching that young man walk out of the community center with hope in his eyes for the first time in months, Tommy felt something he'd been missing for years. Purpose. He finally understood why everything had happened the way it did. The addiction, the homelessness, the ring, all of it. He'd gone through hell so he could help other people find their way out of the same hell. His pain had a purpose. His story had meaning. That night, Tommy sat in his apartment and thought about everything that had changed. 2 years ago, he'd been sleeping under a bridge, wondering if he'd make it another week. Now he was here, in a home, with a job, with people who loved him, with a reason to get up every morning that extended beyond just basic survival. He thought about the ring, sitting safe in Rebecca's jewelry box. He thought about the choice he'd made that night, standing on that corner, holding something worth more money than he'd seen in years. He thought about how easy it would have been to keep it, how easy it would have been to walk away from that flyer and never look back. But he didn't. He made a different choice. The harder choice. The right choice. And that choice had cascaded into everything that came after. Meeting Rebecca and David, getting help, getting clean, getting his life back, reconnecting with his family, finding work that mattered, helping others find their own way home. One choice. That's all it took. One moment of integrity when he could have chosen anything else. One decision to be the person his mother raised him to be instead of the person the streets had turned him into. Tommy pulled out his phone and texted, "Rebecca." "Thank you for changing my life," she texted back immediately. "Thank you for reminding me what matters. Rose wants to meet you again soon." She's starting to smile at people now. Tommy smiled at his phone. A baby who smiled at him. A family that wanted him around. A life that meant something. 2 years ago, he would have said these things were impossible. That people like him didn't get second chances. That once you fell that far, you stayed fallen. But he'd been wrong. People like him did get second chances. Sometimes all it took was one honest act to remind the world and yourself that you were worth saving. The next morning, Tommy woke up early and got ready for work. He made coffee in his own kitchen using his own coffee maker. He put on clean clothes from his own closet. He locked his own door and walked down his own building's stairs. These small things that most people took for granted felt miraculous to him every single day. On his way to work, he passed the spot where he used to sit with his cardboard sign. Someone new was there now, a woman with a dog, trying to stay warm against the morning chill. Tommy stopped and pulled a 20 from his wallet. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "Things get better. I promise." She looked at him with suspicious, tired eyes. "How do you know?" "Because I used to sit right where you're sitting. And now I'm here. It gets better. One day at a time. One good choice at a time." He walked away before she could respond, heading toward his job, toward his life, toward his future. Behind him, the woman looked at the $20 bill in her hand and then at the man walking away. For the first time in weeks, something stirred in her chest, something that felt almost like hope. That's what Tommy's story really was about. Not just about returning a lost ring or getting a second chance. It was about hope, about the possibility of redemption, about how one person's honesty could inspire another person's kindness, which could transform another person's life, which could give someone else hope, creating ripples that spread out farther than anyone could measure. Rebecca's grandmother had worn that ring for 52 years. It had survived wars and decades and hardships nobody today could imagine. And then it fell from Rebecca's finger and landed in a sidewalk crack where a homeless man found it. Was that accident? Or was it meant to happen exactly that way? Tommy didn't know. Maybe nobody knew. But he chose to believe it was meant to happen. That everything in his life, even the worst parts, had led him to that exact moment on that exact corner, so he could make that exact choice. And because he made that choice, everything changed. Not just for him, for Rebecca and David and their baby daughter Rose, for his sister and his nephew, for the young man who came to him for help, for the woman sitting on his old corner this morning, holding a $20 bill and feeling something like hope for the first time in forever.